welcome. We're here for another Brown Paper Bag series. I am with your co-host, Cola.
And I'm with your host, Mr. Brandon Lewis.
And today we're in for a real treat. We have Dr. Joyce King here from Georgia State University. She's a professor, former president of the American Educational Research Association, prolific writer, one of the greatest thinkers of our time, and we're here for a short amount of time just to get some ideas from her regarding education, what's going on within schools, how can we offer more access to parents and students and so forth. So we have a couple of things to go over, and I think Cole is going to propose the first question.
Yes, sir. It's an honor to be able to interview you, by the way, or to converse with you and be at the table with you. I've heard a lot of great things, like I spoke to you earlier about, and just by hearing your introduction, you seem like a woman of power. In the sense that I get from you, it's more personable, and I appreciate that. So the first question is, the journey that you've been on to align to the person you are today, to get you to the point in which you are today. Is there anything that you experienced along the way that you could share with people or just us in general?
Well, today we talk about Black Lives Matter, and I grew up in California, and people might have the image of California as an open place where there's a lot of acceptance, but I grew up at a time when Black people were struggling, as we are now, and people died. So not long ago, I was looking through some of my mother's papers, and I found a funeral program for one of my young cousins who was killed maybe when I was in junior high. So it just caused me to think that, we're looking at things today as if this is a new phenomenon, but there's been an ongoing kind of struggle that was always there, and some of us got opportunities to get out and go to school, but I've always felt like I had an obligation to return what I was getting to my community.
Speaking of many things that have occurred, sort of like the idea that history repeats itself, okay? Looking at young people today, do you think that they're sort of engaging very differently in terms of like social media and the access and getting word out and protesting? Do you think that they have a different way of navigating that space of protest in comparison to before, where we didn't have the Twitter or the Facebook and letting people? So are they in a sense more aware because of maybe the technology? I don't know, how would you frame that?
Well, I have two responses. One is I'm a Black nationalist. My consciousness is Black nationalism. And so people like Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, those are people that I look to in history as a beacon, a way to think about what was done and therefore what we need to be doing. And those three people, Garvey in particular, had no fax machine, had no phone connect, and no internet, and he organized Black people all over the world. So that's part of our historical reality. I think some young people are very much aware, and yes, they are using social media in some very impactful ways.
It makes me think about David Walker as well, another individual.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we were thinking about as well, and particularly in your experiences, to kind of go along with Cola's question, what were your experiences like as a Black student at Stanford? I don't know if you want to define it as a Black student, but I'm sure your Blackness did impact your journey while you were there, and I don't know if you could touch on that just a little bit.
Well, I think what's more outstanding is the period of time that I went to school and the context, which meant that I went to school at the time when the movement was a reality. So I didn't experience Stanford as an individual. I experienced Stanford as part of things that were happening in the world beyond just my personal life. And so I was a student activist, participated in developing African American studies, and all of those things were part of the context. But my class, I went to Stanford in 1965, my class was the first class that had more than 4 Black students. We had 25.
Speaking on, you said while you were at Stanford, you engaged in black activists. Was it because the time period of what you said was going on at the time that brought you to do that, or was it part of who you were already as a person?
It's a longer story. I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school and go to college. So when I got to Stanford, my class had 25 black students. That was a lot more than had ever been on campus, and we were observable, we were seen. But not everybody in my class came from the same social background. Some parents had, there were doctors' children, and so different class experiences. My experience was coming from the working class. And my experience was also that I discovered that, if I put it simply, I could graduate from Stanford and not be able to talk to my grandmother. That it would be a divide between me and the people that I came from. So I discovered that as a freshman. And so then that made me very aware of what I was learning. And at the same time, the movement was going on. So Black Studies kicked off at San Francisco State, and other things happened. So it's a combination. You asked me before, is that psychology or sociology? And I said both. So psychology and sociology, both going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And how did you sort of get into this concept of black education, and what is that? When people hear that, so for example, a lot of times titles like that scare people. Oh my gosh, what is this black education?
Scare people.
Exactly, absolutely, exactly. So, so if you were talking to individuals that may not be as familiar, if you're talking to parents or whatnot, what is the concept behind what black education is, and what are you really trying to push within that narrative and that conversation?
My grandmother, who had a third grade education, always said, stand up for your rights. That's what black education means. Be yourself, stand up for your rights, be a good human being. And that means you have to learn from a true standpoint what really is going on, so that you can make choices, so that anybody can make choices. So black education for black children is really against alienation. Black education is not just for black children. It's for anybody that wants to be a better human being.
And do you feel that you've done a lot of preparation with teachers and with schools? I know you spoke at countless events. Do you feel that message is, no, let me rephrase that. What is the overall message that you usually try to indicate to sort of beginning teachers and things like that, and the workshops and the things that you do? What is something that particularly if you have a short amount of time with these individuals, what are some of the major ideas that you want them to walk away with so that they can become better teachers, particularly in working with diverse students?
Well, my students, especially white students, I was director of teacher education for 12 years at Santa Clara University. In that 12 years, I had 2 students of color. One was an Asian student, well, he was Mexican American, actually, trying to pass himself off as Asian.
Okay.
And I had a black student. So in those 12 years, my students were Italian, Jewish, white heritage. But they would often say, thank you, Dr. King, for opening our minds. So we would look at not just the experience of people of color, but their own experience. What kind of education did you get where you were? And has it prepared you to really do the things that you need to be doing to benefit humanity?
And we talked a little bit about the teachers. One of the conversations or the things that we've been trying to push as well is access for parents. And the reason why I say that, I talk to many friends, and I'm sure you have as well, and I'm sure Cola has as well. But when I'm having conversations, sometimes I hear this idea from parents or from just different people in the community. I'm not really quite sure about scholarship, or what is scholarship, or how do I find out more about scholarship, right? So it became apparent to me that there's not as much access in some of the places that we need there to be, because people want to know and learn, but sometimes they have difficulty navigating that space. So what are some ways that you think that we can do to offer more access to parents so that they'll know different trends that are going on within education, so they'll know different strategies for working with their kids, and even teachers, so they'll know different things that are going on that they can improve their classroom with? What are some things that you think that can be done to create more access to those spaces?
Well, you need an education philosophy that incorporates the community in a serious way, not a philosophy that says we're going to educate your child so he can get out and get away and do better or whatever as an individual. So when you have an educational philosophy that is community oriented, then the education process involves everyone, the parents, the teachers, the children, and there needs to be spaces for that kind of collaborative engagement.